Born of Bread is an incredibly charming Paper Mario-inspired indie RPG. Initially, it released multi-platform December 5th of 2023 by Wild Arts Studio. Previous to this, they have made a horror game called Helltown, as well as an upcoming also horror game called Caput Mortem. And scrolling through this French-Canadian trio socials shows a sort of Bread game spin-off that's still in progress called Desk Deck Hero. So, what exactly is Born of Bread then? It advertises itself as a wacky and joyful RPG with turn-based combat tropes, a sentient bread quest, explorable and mysterious world regions, and buddies with unique personality. With two ends, apparently. Did it come out of the oven fully baked? A little doughy in the middle? Or maybe crispy around the edges? Let's find out! Oh, and before I forget, I did play this on the Nintendo Switch 2. I did say that it's multi-platform, so technically I'm playing the Nintendo Switch 1 version on a Nintendo Switch 2 console specifically, as I don't think this game had a specific update for that. And before we get too deep into it, I'll go ahead and say, I'm Sir Armor Turtle, and I use this channel to talk about mostly Nintendo games. Sometimes I make like a meme post video or general commentary, while other times a full-on review like this. If you'd like to keep up with me, hitting the subscription button would be greatly appreciated. Now on to the plot. The game begins when a trio of scholarly professors are poking around some ancient ruins and accidentally unleash a group of purple fire bros from an ancient Ember Empire. The littlest and fieriest of the bunch, Jester, leads the group as the main villain with a goal of restoring said ancient Ember Empire with a collection of magical rocks. Simultaneous to the awakening of Purple Fire Gang, a certain Papa Baker is preparing a meal for Her Majesty within the kitchen castle of Royaltown. He apparently added a bit too much love into his bread recipe, and out the oven pops our hero, Loaf. He's a gluten-free bread golem. Some incidents within the castle occur that conclude with Papa Baker, Loaf, a magical sunstone, Jester, and an explosion that catapults our hero into the woods. Oh, and a rather snobby queen that always looks like she's stuck on an elevator with someone who's had a rather sour fart. From here, the meta plot of collecting all the sunstones before Jester's crew commences, but also a collection of minor area subplots, as each area has its own thing going on, as well as its own companion character for Loaf. The forest introduces Lint, a young directionless raccoon rider who was lovable enough that my brain automatically created a squealing voice each time I read his dialogue lines. His subplot is about being reunited with his family, as being forgetful and directionless is a family trait. Within the forest, you'll also find Lapwing Village, which is feuding between inhabitants. Half of them are birds, and the other half are badgers running a mine, and it's up to our bread boy to solve their problems. And, of course, those purple, fiery fools appear everywhere, too. This continues on through other areas and side quests like Royaltown and its Heroes Guild that introduces Dub the Dragon, or the martial arts Holy Highlands with Yagi the Goat, or the tropical pirate-themed R Lagoon. But my favorite was the Frosty Flats with its Coldstock Manor. This section is a whole haunted mansion mystery quest. It probably is the highlight of the game for me, really. I love a good, mystery puzzle, especially more so with the general spooky theme and all the kooky members of Chloe Coldstock's family that only really sorta want to help you. I don't want to get too deep into the story over spoilers, but I can say I quite enjoyed it. I really liked how the world building seemed to fit everything together. A lot of the time in games like this, each area sort of feels like its own thing, independent of everything else, but here the way characters and NPCs move about the world and talk through each other in each area gives a good sense of cohesion and makes the world feel actually more alive and connected. It's also pretty cool that within the main storyline there are small intermission sections where you play from the perspective of Jester. It was a fun touch that helps change up the gameplay as well as keeping the story and characters together for the end user. One negative note, however, and keeping it abrupt to avoid spoilers, the game sort of ends quick. Like, the final section area is really small in comparison to the rest, and the lead up just sort of happens all of a sudden, it feels like. It makes me wonder if there was some like cut content there and they wrapped up things a little quick so that the game could be finished up and put out. General gameplay consists of walking between each area, some combat, and chatting with NPCs. Sometimes for the main quest, other times for side quests. Each area is navigated by a bit of platforming and some small puzzles, and I gotta say the platforming itself kinda sucks. The camera is in a locked view and you're making a 2D character sprite bounce around what is a 3D world, which leaves a lot to be desired in terms of like the hitboxes for the platforming. I often found myself struggling with jumps that appear as though they should be easy and accidentally falling off the edges of maps to explore, and sometimes getting my character stuck in like odd spots that you aren't actually supposed to be jumping to. Okay, so sometimes like the falling off the edge bit isn't an issue with the platforming itself, but with the map layout. So every area has some little puzzles and secrets, which is neat, but also frustrating due to backtracking. You see, the companion characters, besides helping in combat, each have a unique non-combat ability which aids in world traversal somehow. Lint digs up dirt mounds, Yagi turns semi-invisible mushrooms into tangible platforms you can jump onto, Chloe throws flaming lanterns, and so on. This is all fine and dandy, but as every map seems to require every character to actually do 100%, you're left backtracking from the very end of the game back to the very beginning again, which would be cool, except you'll still have to fight your way through enemies the whole time. There isn't like a quick battle option to take out lower level mobs. If there is, I totally missed it, and they don't give you very much XP, so it's not worth like fighting them again. So while backtracking, I did a bunch of needless combat that gave me the minimal experience gains, and really it just felt like it became busy work, and I'm groaning about it now. While I'm whining about stuff, I should probably also point out that the fast travel system doesn't really open up until you're about midway through the entire game for some reason. I feel like this could potentially alleviate some like onset frustrations with the backtracking as a concern if people knew that it was like a thing from the beginning of the game. Before I get too deep into the combat, I should say it's pretty heavily inspired by Paper Mario. Different attacks have different sort of quick time event minigame, hit the right button combo, keep the pointer in the middle of the circle, put the spinner in the right place, etc. Now, Nintendo games are big studio products. Gold standard gaming. They typically top out those like greatest games of all time lists, which makes it really hard to compare something like small indie developed Born of Bread. Is the combat in Born of Bread as highly polished and perfected as Paper Mario? No. Does it get the job done? Sure. Battles will include Loaf and a companion of your choosing and work in a turn-based manner. Loaf's weapon choice is dependent on what exactly is equipped into his sort of Tetris-esque backpack, while the companions have a separate level-up system dependent on hunting down hidden lizards and bringing their souls to some spooky wizard folks, which is more of that potentially frustrating backtracking, by the way. For Loaf's level up, on the other hand, you can pick between a few stats, HP, WP, or RP, and whether or not to have more inventory or boon slots. Each attack has a sort of elemental type association with its weapon type. Enemies will have a weakness and a strength to or against these. In my experience, it seemed that nearly all of the type matchups were negated because the weapons Loaf ended up with sit in a position where enemies have a simultaneous weakness to the element but defense against the weapon type, which makes the whole system feel really convoluted. And I think that's my biggest gripe with this game in general, and its combat in general. There's too much going on. There's too many systems. I appreciate the attempt at adding more depth into the simplicity of the Paper Mario style combat, but at a certain point it becomes redundant, and as a player I ended up completely ignoring certain aspects, like the whole resolve point part of combat. Didn't use it at all. Okay, so the type matchups get wonky since attacks are dual type. Main character and buddy level up systems are separated and different. Companions only take damage if you tell them to defend instead of attack. Resolve moves are only usable by Loaf, but can't really compete with the more general attacks that use will points. Will points sometimes restore due to this like fake pretend live streaming UI overlay with generated chat and viewer numbers based on how well you're doing in combat. Sometimes chatter will ask you to do certain things and you'll gain like extra bonus because of it if you do the thing they're asking for. The combat UI is shown through these like cards, which can be swapped out for other cards that seem to have their own types. Granted, maybe I just didn't pay good enough attention to the tutorials, maybe there are poorly explained. On the other hand, in complete honesty, I totally ignored pretty much like half of the combat features entirely, and for the most part I was able to breeze through the game with ease. There are like a couple small places where there's a difficulty spike, but that's like easily remedied if you quickly grind out another level up and use a couple healing items. The inventory is separate from the weapon equipment inventory, which the item inventory is like annoyingly small. As a note about this game just having too many systems, if I remember right, the weapon inventory, item inventory, and a money wallet are all pretty small, and they all have a separate path to increase in size. Too many systems. Final complaint I'll make here, which is incredibly minor, is that scrolling all the way through the UI doesn't reset at the top. There's no scroll through. You can go up and down from the top to the bottom. Really not the end of the world, but something very tiny that I kept getting myself caught up on and thinking, wow, this like super minor thing would really be a huge quality of life feature. Visually, this game is what you'd expect out of like a Nintendo Switch game. The cartoony art direction and character design is fun. The environments are nice to look at and range from golden-hued farm fields to cyber-bright whale guts to snow-capped winter wonderlands. I do, however, think I notice a discrepancy between video and screenshots taken on other platforms versus the Switch edition. You can tell the resolution is scaled differently. Not world-ending, but is like noticeable enough to be noticeable. The graphical effects seem to be toned down a bit on the Switch as well. Maybe it's just in my head, but when I compare screenshots, the version I played seems less HD, less like 3D environmentally, less shadowy, less shady light bloom effecty. which is fine for me. I'm not like a big complainer about something like this, but I feel like it should be pointed out if you're like a stickler over this sort of thing. And if you are, then like, I don't know, pick up the game for PC instead of Switch. Oh, and I was surprised to see random environment objects with physics. Just like random stuff in the environment, barrels, balls, whatever. They have like a physics engine, you'd kick them around. It's a small thing that made things feel more fun and interesting to me. I liked it. Now, the sound. The music in this one is pretty fun. Every area has a pretty good, whimsical, and quirky feel to it because of the music. Overall, there's some pretty good variety in the songs, and I really enjoyed how sometimes certain areas would blend and fade the music together. It's a soundtrack that, in my opinion, keeps true to the visuals and like spirit of the game as a whole. Usually I don't care whether there's voice acting or not. Looking past the soundtrack and just general sounds. For some reason, in this case of this game, I just kept wishing that there was voice acting. Maybe it's because I liked the characters and writing so much that like several of their voices spawned into my head automatically, and I'd wished that I could hear them actualized. Now, unfortunately, I encountered several bugs, glitches, and errors during my playtime. I did not 100% complete everything in the game. I did play through the entirety of the main quest, as well as several side objectives and as much exploration as I wanted to do, and I didn't end up in any sort of like hard lock or soft lock situation to my progress. So the game's definitely playable, but it certainly had a lot of small issues. And here's like a short list of problems that I encountered that, like I said, they didn't lock my progress. I was able to complete the game. These are just small issues that kept happening that were annoying. Randomly lost the ability to jump until resetting the game, getting stuck jumping in and behind the environment, the entire background environment turning into a black screen, with the exception of my characters. The UI becoming frozen until game reset. In combat, I defeated enemies to the point that they had 0 health and appeared to be dead, but they still got combat turns and were attacking me. It's a bummer that each play session had a noticeable issue, even if only it was a minor one. Okay, so final thoughts, feelings, score. I once heard someone describe Born of Bread as, this game would have made rounds back in the 2000s as a webcomic, and also, it reminds me of Saturday morning cartoons. Those seem to be statements I wholeheartedly agree with. The art direction, the music, the characters, the story, they're really the highlights of the game over the majority of its gameplay. The general gameplay sometimes feels convoluted between so many different, potentially redundant systems, but it's definitely tolerable and held up by the other aspects of the game as a whole. Unfortunately, there seems to be persistent minor bugs and issues that show an inherent lack of polish as an end product. With that said, overall the game can definitely be lovable despite its problems, and I hope it's an IP that we see return in the future. Now, all this talking has got me hungry, so I'm gonna go eat some spaghetti. With extra garlic bread, of course.